Hey everyone, JCS Starcraft here, bringing you a game from the Korean servers between GundamWerRa, I think, as the blue Zerg, and chitaPrime, Cheetah, I like that name, as the red Protoss. Now, I think this game, I wasn't able to find out too much about these players. Prime, of course, is one of the top clans in Korea, one of the better teams in Korea, and a lot of the world top players come from Prime. I think chitaPrime, and I've seen Mystic Prime, and a whole bunch of other Prime guys are just kind of dominating the Korean servers right now too. And so kind of going to be some interesting play. I think Koreans they've started to get into StarCraft 2. I know that during the beta there wasn't that much commitment from the Korean teams. A lot of Korea is pretty heavily sponsored in terms of gaming, so I would imagine that part of the reason why the teams didn't really make a transition was there's a lot of money still on StarCraft and Warcraft 3, but hopefully Koreans seem to be adopting StarCraft 2 as the next big esports game, and we should be seeing a lot of very interesting and creative play coming out of Korea. So right now, GundamWerRa just did a single extractor trick to get a little bit ahead. I think you don't really get too far ahead doing the double extractor trick. I saw on Team Liquid, someone did the analysis, and I think you pull ahead with just a handful of minerals, but maybe it's not worth it, and just kind of whatever flavor you're doing. chitaPrime right now going to be throwing down this double gateway, so he's going to block off any sort of early attack, probably going to be going some sort of forward so he can put down a cannon right here, and just far enough so that roaches have a really hard time hitting it if GundamWerRa were to go roaches. But meanwhile, he can definitely still kind of keep these active, and going to be double gating, probably going to be rushing with those zealots, applying some sort of early pressure, and being able to choke off this point. He can take his early expansion without worrying too much, so something that he can kind of try to keep up with the Zerg player right now. Just taking a look at their income tab, pretty even in the start, and GundamWerRa going to be scouting both sides. chitaPrime, I looked up on SC2 ranks with SC2ranks.com, which is a great indexer of pretty much all the StarCraft players in the world. I know that Blizzard recently also released their own StarCraft ranking index, but I really like SC2 ranks because it's very up to date. They do a lot of scans pretty frequently. You know, like you hit refresh in half hour and you'll get up to date scans. And chitaPrime throwing down his photo cannon right now too. Probably going to be throwing another one here, I imagine, because these rocks can fall pretty easily if GundamWerRa wanted to attack down that alley as well. This zealot trying to scout to see if GundamWerRa was going to take this expansion, but instead, one of the early scouts just kind of ran back here, going to be throwing down this proxy pylon, and going to be throwing down a cannon, two cannons at the base. I don't know if GundamWerRa doesn't see this. Very smart play by chitaPrime, and with unless he saw it, which I don't think he did, he's just kind of scouting around right now. This base will definitely go down. So chitaPrime holding off his opponent from expanding, and it looks like he's going to be taking, or he is set up to take one of his own right now. Just looking at the units, chitaPrime has no units on the map, and is just going to go with this kind of cannon contain right now, using the geography of the map. GundamWerRa has to cancel his expansion. chitaPrime canceling his as well, doesn't want to waste the money if he doesn't have to, and going to be throwing down a cannon in front as well. Meanwhile, GundamWerRa is just going to be taking his other expansion, because if he can't take his natural, he just might as well take another one. And chitaPrime, it looks like he just wants to set up his economy right now, knows that GundamWerRa won't be able to create enough forces to really do any sort of damage. And kind of interesting play here. An early rush probably wouldn't have done much. I mean, I think that choking off like this can hold off, but I think you have to have a pretty good sense of what your opponent is up to. Cheetah is going to be able to get in here and kind of scout and see, okay, Gundam took his expansion, probably going to be working on saturating at this point both players in a race to build up their economy, and going to be interesting to see what Cheetah is doing. At this point, Cheetah has just thrown down his cyber core and has not built any units whatsoever. I want to see GundamWerRa try to make an attack at this point and see if he can get in, or if he just knows that, you know, he sees the cannon there, doesn't want to waste his units right now, and instead going to be just trying to macro up as much as possible so he can come in with overwhelming forces as much as he can. Meanwhile, Cheetah setting up his expansion, and I still has no units. His entire army is composed of these probes right now. So kind of a waiting game on both sides. Gundam using the Overlord with the high ground so that he can't be seen by that and just can kind of float there and gain the vision that way too. Meanwhile, going to be taking the gold expansion as well, so cannot have his expo here. And this is pretty interesting too, because I want to see if Cheetah, if he does go warp gates, now throwing down just a whole bunch of gateways at once, looking at the production tab, getting the 48 on, getting that warp technology going, he could just warp a few units in here and run straight into the base, kind of crack that whole thing too. So I think Gundam is going to have to take that out at some point once he feels that he's comfortable with his macro. Looks like Blink being researched by chitaPrime, so we're going to see a lot of pretty interesting Stalker play, I assume, and Gundam just running in here, checking things out. Does he have enough for a Contaminate? No, he doesn't, and hopefully he'll throw it down. I love watching Contaminates go down. One of the great uses of the Overseer is really to slow down a lot of the things that take a long time to research. If you can slow down that warp technology, that would be pretty cool as well. Meanwhile, it looks like a lot of spine crawlers just getting thrown down right now. So the Korean players on the Korean servers not afraid to just throw down a ton of non-moving units, just structures that will defend, so that they can ramp up and really build. Yes, a Contaminate does go down on the forge right before the research is being done. So fun job by GundamWerRa. And now the units are finally starting to come in. So 10 minutes into the